Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's session. My name's Michael Wybrow. I'm the Director of Work Integrated Learning here at Monash University in the Faculty of IT. So I'd just like to begin this session by respectively asking you to acknowledge the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which several of Monash's campuses and many of us are meeting today, and to pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So today's webinar is focused on industry learning placements, on industry experience units and studio projects. So I'm going to talk about all of these in this session. And a bit of housekeeping before we get started. This session will be recorded. You'll notice that your mic is muted. You won't be able to unmute yourself. That's just to avoid any confusion and background noise. You may hear some music in the background. I'm at home like everyone else, and my wife teaches music, so you may hear a little bit of that, but hopefully it'll be nice background music. If you do have any questions you want to ask, just pop them into the chat and I will address them at the end of the session. So we realize you might have questions about the impacts of COVID-19 on various operations at the university. We'd ask that you please check the fact sheet on the website as there's lots of information there. And once again, just thank you for choosing to attend this session. We're really pleased to have you with us, and we trust that everyone will support the delivery of an engaging session in a respectful environment. All right. So I want to start with talking about why study information technology at all. First off, just the increased use and influence of software systems. We're increasingly surrounded by devices and appliances that are software controlled. We have more and more complicated processes that are being automated through the use of software. And whether you study information technology with the intention of it being your primary focus, or whether you study it as a secondary focus, we know that IT literacy results in steeper career trajectory. So it's beneficial all round. And even if you're not an IT professional yourself, there's a need for everyone to understand IT and to understand software. It's very likely that you'll be working with software in some form as part of your job, regardless of what your work is. And understanding the advantages and limitations of software is really, really important. You also need to be able to communicate effectively with IT professionals. So these might be, if you're a software developer, then you're communicating about what you work on with non-technical people. And if you're a non-technical person, you need to be able to communicate with IT professionals. So having some basis for those discussions and understanding of the common language is really important. And learning to program, which is what information technology, what the focus of a lot of our IT degrees is, it's just a really valuable tool that you can have in your problem-solving toolbox. And in addition to this, we know that learning to program basically involves breaking down problems into small logical pieces that you can solve individually and put together to build up a more complicated solution. And that kind of logical way of thinking is a really useful skill to learn to pretty much any technical profession. In this presentation, I'm going to talk to you about our degrees. And because I'm talking about how various work integrated learning experiences fit into our curriculum, I want to just very briefly talk to you about our degrees. For all our students, we have an academic year. It consists of 2 semesters. A student will typically take 4 units per semester. This is a full-time load. Each of their units is typically worth 6 points. And for an undergraduate degree, this is a 3-year degree. It's 6 semesters, obviously 24 units, and 144 points total. I'm giving you this context just because some of the offerings I'm going to talk about in the following slides are going to be discussed in terms of these points. So what are our undergraduate degrees? We have several: Bachelor of Information Technology, Bachelor of Computer Science, Bachelor of Software Engineering. Within, say, the Bachelor of Information Technology, there's a number of majors, things like business information systems. These are people that would typically go on to do project management or be business analysts, things like that. We have software development, networks and security, interactive media, which is another of the sort of less technical disciplines, games development. And we have Bachelor of Computer Science and Bachelor of Software Engineering. Both of the latter two are kind of more technical, but and probably industry doesn't differentiate hugely in terms of these two, but they have different focuses. So computer science is more focused on, say, algorithm development and how you go about solving problems, whereas software engineering is more focused on the process of developing robust software. And in addition to this, many of our students do double degrees. So it's very common for students to have double degrees with, say, commerce or something like that. And these are 4-year degrees then. And it's fair to say that some, but not all of these students report that they, when they find out the breadth and scope of our IT degrees, often they say they didn't need their other degree. So our IT degrees are fairly broad in the choices that you can have within them. I'm mostly talking about undergraduate here, but I will also talk about postgraduate. I realize for this online version of Open Day, we have more people who are interested in postgraduate degrees as well as our undergraduate offerings. I want to talk a little bit about life as an IT professional and maybe what a stereotype of this looks like. In the past, if you said to someone, I'm an IT professional, or you asked and polled the average person what an IT professional or a programmer would be like, they might have had particular ideas about what this was. And the sort of process that people thought that, and how software was developed in the past was, the professional would go about collecting the client's requirements, figuring out what they wanted in a particular piece of software. This software would be developed over several years with little client intervention, and several years because most non-trivial pieces of software are really complicated in the same way the human body as a system is complicated, right? So they're not trivial to develop and it takes a lot of time. But here the idea was that you'd have quiet coders, programmers coding in isolation, making decisions for the client in their absence. And at some point you'd deliver a piece of software finished. And the danger with this is it's not what the client wants, right? In the intervening time that all this development was done, times have moved on and you get something that's not fit for purpose. And I give you this context because this isn't what life as an IT professional, as any of our graduates are. It isn't what life is like for them. So what is life like for them? Well, life for an IT professional nowadays is much more of a sort of noisy, dynamic team environment. It's very rare you get individuals working by themselves on projects. What this typically looks like is clients' immediate requirements are gathered. This is a less sort of onerous process. It's much quicker. Things are built typically in 2-week sprints, as they're called, and you show the client and you get feedback. And the sort of methodology that describes this is what's known as Agile development. And you don't need to know what all of the terms are that I've listed after here are, but they're all about processes for working together with other people on complicated things and making sure that the software that's produced is fit for purpose. And that requires a lot of communication. And that means things like daily stand-ups where team members are talking to each other about what they're working on and what's blocking them and how they can progress things. This is things like pair programming where one person is typing and someone else is looking over their shoulder and correcting mistakes and coming up with things they might have missed. It involves things like coders reviewing each other's code, people using Kanban boards, which are basically walls full of stories which describe individual pieces of functionality that are broken down into bite-sized pieces that people can work on, and doing things like retrospectives or retros, where people talk about, you know, what worked and what didn't, and how they can work more effectively. So this is an iterative process. Things are built in sprints. There's prototypes. You can use them. You know, it's not like we're building one giant monolithic thing over a long time. And we sort of rinse and repeat and go through this process. What all this means, though, is that it's really important to communicate and work effectively with others. You're not working by yourself as an IT professional. So this leads us on to why it's important to have industry experience. So industry experience is all about developing essential skills for employability, work life, and a professional IT career. And obviously this involves all of the technical skills. So kind of things I've talked about already, various processes like Agile processes, understanding how to program and write good code, and how to break down problems in the ways that I talked about. But also it involves things like problem solving skills, teamwork, communication, both written, oral, and presentation skills, interpersonal skills, corporate behavior and networking, establishing a personal brand, and exposure to potential employers. So, and you might say, okay, well, do you teach these things? And the answer to that is yes, we teach all of these at university. And as best possible, we simulate practice as best we can. But most of the software and projects that students build or work on in their degree, by necessity, has to be on a smaller scale, right? It has to be understandable in the context of a unit where a student is learning about a particular topic. And this means we can't really, or truly, let's say, simulate the scale and complexity of real practice, nor the real corporate environment. And look, it's very common, a very common sentiment I hear from students who've gone through the experiences that I'll talk about in a moment, our work integrated learning offerings, is that they say, it wasn't until I had these work integrated learning experiences that I really saw the benefit or need for something that I'd been taught. I mean, I knew, I was told it was important in a particular unit, but I didn't really believe it. And that might be something like software testing or some aspect of design, right? And then when there are implications because they're in a real world setting and some piece of software that they have produced is being used to provide analytics to, you know, the general manager of a company or something, or their work is being put in front of real users, and if they make a mistake and something goes wrong, it's seen by hundreds or thousands of users. Suddenly the stakes are obviously more important. So I'll talk about who gets these experiences. These experiences are available to all FIT students. They're built into our degrees, both undergraduates and postgraduate students, all domestic and international students, and all IT degrees, both single and double degrees. So what are the experiences that are available? We have Capstone Units, and these are for the Bachelor of IT industry experience. For the Bachelor of Computer Science and Bachelor of Software Engineering, these are studio project units. We have a program called IBL, Industry-Based Learning, which is a semester-long internship with a scholarship. And there are also multidisciplinary summer internships with scholarships that are run across the university between different faculties. This is the program called Mighty Monash Industry Team Initiative. I'll talk about each of these in turn. So to start out, the Capstone Units. These are university-based. They're final year units. It's 2 units in subsequent semesters. And these are group work projects, so students work in teams, and they do this in purpose-built studios on the campus. Obviously, this is a little different right now with the COVID situation, where people are working remotely from home. And this fosters collaboration, peer learning, and responsibility. And they have a real world client. So we typically source these through relationships with local councils. And these are typically small businesses that need something built for them, like a piece of software for, say, stock management or something. And these teams develop software as specified by the client. And they use modern development processes like the Agile process we mentioned, or I mentioned earlier. And this is a chance for students to obviously put into practice all of the theory, tools, techniques that they've learned in their degree. So they go through their degree, as the diagram on the right shows, they do all their units, and the capstone units, finish off their degree, and they get to put all this into practice, and it combines a lot of the things they've learned in individual units. The IBL program, as I said before, has a scholarship. Students that are, and this is an exclusive program, so students must apply for it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Students who are successfully placed through the program receive a scholarship of $18,000. And these students are embedded in a partner company for a 23-week placement. So this is basically for a whole semester. And as you may recall, a semester is 4 degree units. So the student doesn't attend university, they just do this placement for instead of 4 units. And it says only 3 or 4, obviously. So the students overload in one of the semesters, either before or afterwards. They're supervised by someone at the partner company. So they'll have a supervisor, they might have a buddy or life coach or other people as well. And they're visited by academics. So part of this is that there's an assessment element. The students are typically performing graduate level real world tasks. And as it says here, there's assessment both by industry and faculty, because this is a learning experience, obviously. So it's work-based learning. And again, like the other program, it's a chance for students to put into practice this their theory, tools, and techniques they've learned. So the stronger students will typically apply for IBL, and the ones that don't get IBL placements will do the industry experience or the studio project units. I'm not going to go through this in detail. I'm just going to say that for the IBL, there's various requirements. Students need to have an initial weighted average mark in order to apply. We run entry interviews, and there's a process where their course map is checked, because obviously we need to ensure that they can fit a placement into their degree. And then there are various sort of potential exit points where students can exit from the program if they no longer meet the requirements, like weighted average mark or in the placement interviews, which I'll just talk about in a moment. So the selection process looks like you apply to the IBL program. We conduct entry interviews, or rather these are conducted by our industry partners, and it says partner company neutral. This basically means that it may not be the company that you would end up being placed with that interviews you. These are just initial entry interviews to basically assess readiness for a placement. So they just say, is this student ready to go out on placement? Subsequently, we conduct industry placement interviews, kind of like interview speed dating, where you'd speak to potentially all of our partners and have a short interview with them, and they preference each of the students and say, I would like this student, I will take this student, or I don't want this student. Students have to maintain a weighted average mark throughout this process at a particular level. And there are some other requirements for overloading. So we know from these interviews that communication skills are important: energy, enthusiasm, maturity, independence, leadership potential. And these are things we're both looking for here, but also grow and strengthen throughout the program. So the IBL program is about 30 years old. We place about 120 students or more per semester. This is pre-COVID. Obviously, things are a bit quieter now with lots of people not doing a lot of hiring at the moment. And we know that the students that go through this program have excellent outcomes. So we survey them each semester, and we know 90% of them get employment offers before graduation. We know that 70 to 80% of them are employed by our industry partners. And we know that many of them are employed part-time while they finish their degree. So yeah, there are great benefits to being involved in this. Some of the partner companies we work with, and I should say a number of these are common to both our industry experience program and the IBL program. Obviously, the big four consulting companies, the banks, various other large Melbourne businesses. I'd like to talk a little bit about Mighty. So the Mighty program is a paid internship. The difference with this one is it doesn't count towards the students' degrees. Students have to apply for this program as well. And they select multidisciplinary teams from across different faculties. So it might be one IT student, an engineering student, someone from commerce, etc. And they do this on purpose because they've found that they get great benefits from having a range of disciplines. And these students are embedded in a partner company for 12 weeks during their summer break. And they can be both postgraduates and undergraduates as well. And they get asked to solve a problem. And it's typically, something that a company is stuck on and wants some thinking outside the box on. And yeah, they tackle a specific problem. So I'm going to use Transurban as an example in this for a couple of projects that are IT specific or related. And one of the ones that I saw a presentation for last semester was students that were looking at the problem of people on some of the toll roads in Melbourne not obeying overhead lane warnings that tell them a lane is closed, and what some of the solutions could be to this. And it was really fascinating to see some of the things that the students came up with for this. Another success story of this was the mobile app that is available from Transurban, who run the toll roads in Melbourne. This app was built by two Mighty teams that both involved faculty of IT students. And this is obviously an app that's used by many, many people. So it's one of the great success stories out of this program. Just to finish off, I didn't really mention our graduate degrees. We have a number of coursework master's degrees, and these also include an industry experience unit. This, like the undergraduate, is a capstone unit. The difference here is it's done in a single semester, though it's worth 2 degree units. Again, it's teamwork, so students work together on a particular problem. The difference here is that instead of having an industry client, these teams are groups, these teams get assigned a topic under the broad banner of IT for social good, and they determine a problem themselves within that particular topic area. They utilize open data and they develop some kind of solution, typically maybe a website, a piece of software, or an app. And again, they use modern development processes. You might say, what's the industry component of this? Well, they have industry mentors from a number of our partners that are like some of the ones I listed earlier on that slide. And the students initially pitch their project ideas to the industry mentors, and later during each sprint, each 2-week block of work that they do, they demonstrate their iterations of their software to the industry mentors each time, and the industry mentors guide them and give them the benefit of their experience. And again, this is a chance for students to put into practice all of the theory and tools and techniques that they've learned in their degree. So we've only got a couple of minutes now. I'm going to ask any or check if there's any questions. I don't see any, so that's fine. While I just wait and see if there are any questions asked. I will just show a couple of testimonials so you can see some of the feedback that people that go through this or are involved in this program, both from the industry and the student side, have said. So this is from one of the undergraduate industry experience projects, and this organisation, Link Community Transport, just said that this had been a very valuable internally in opening staff to new ideas and the exploitation of technology. And the system that was built by students allowed them to make substantial improvements in operating their fleet and meeting client needs and expectations. And you can see here the team of students pictured. This is Scott Charlton, the CEO of Transurban. He has been involved in the Mighty program for several years and just said one of the biggest positives is to challenge our team's thinking. And he just said you bring in very energetic, talented people, i.e. students, without biases or background in the industry, and they just think differently. And I guess this is a testament to the kind of multidisciplinary nature of the Mighty program. I have a couple of testimonials from the IBL program. This is Draga, and she said, if you're considering a career in the tech industry, the IBL program is the single most useful experience you can have throughout your university degree. Obviously just raves about the benefit here. This is Isaac. He said the IBL program is a remarkable opportunity to gain real-world experience, make long-lasting connections, and to take responsibility of your future by engaging in something meaningful. I would highly recommend the program to anyone who is eligible. And one of the things we love about the program is seeing the growth of the students, both in IBL, but also in the industry experience units. It's wonderful to see them mature in that setting as they work on these real-world projects. Isabel said, I've had projects that I've worked on put into production across customer operations and road network optimization, showcased to the chief technical officer, and I've also learned a lot about myself in the world of data analytics. I mean, and this is, again, a testament to the things that the students are doing are real. They're not just given, toy projects to do or something that doesn't matter. They're doing real work that, or they're given real tasks that have real world implications, and people get to enjoy the benefits of them. Okay, so let me just see if I can see the chat anyway.
No worries, I can help with the first one there. Is the IBL program really competitive?
It is quite competitive. I don't know exactly how to quantify really competitive. I can tell you about the selection process. So I can, basically what happens is to apply, students just have to meet the WAM requirements, which is their weighted average mark. Beyond that, they need to pass through the entry interview, which basically means that they're interviewed by one of our industry partners who assesses them and said, yep, they're good, they could go out on placement. And that's the initial eligibility requirement, and they need to be able to fit it into their degree. So they need to have discussed the course map and made sure there's space. Beyond that, the way that they're selected is basically by our industry partners. So if the students can impress upon the industry partners, how good they could be on a placement, that's really what they're assessed on. Okay, sorry, I didn't see the chat. What else? Do we have any other questions? Can international students be part of the IBL program? Yes, international students can be part of the IBL program. Obviously, when we're talking about international students, we're talking about international students who are on campus in Australia, typically. Right now, all of our IBL placements are being done remotely because Melbourne is in work from home mode with COVID. But we've been very impressed with the learning experiences that our students have got. Our placements from semester one this year had most of the students started out working in person at the organizations, and then sometime midway through switched to working from home, but have still had very excellent outcomes. So we've continued to run the placement in this mode. But the answer to that question is yes, international students can be involved in the IBL program. What is the difference between Bachelor of Information Technology, computer science and software engineering? This is a very common, good question. Look, the simple answer to it is that they can all look somewhat similar. If you look at all of the degrees, there are many common units between them, and most of the degrees have electives where you get to, they have some core units where that you must do as part of that degree, because that's expected knowledge that you would expect any graduate of that degree to have. And then there's a number of electives where you can tailor the degree to your interests. So obviously you can configure these different degrees somewhat to look like each other, but it's really the different flavor that they have at the beginning. So I can probably just for a second go back to my slide, that is this one. I mean, software engineering is really focused on the process of engineering and building large-scale pieces of software that are kind of the more complicated things, let's say. Computer science is more focused on the problem-solving aspect of solving computing problems. And then the Bachelor of IT is a more general degree that encompasses various things, as we said, like it could be the less technical topics like project management or business analysts, things like that, or I should say professions like that, or networks and security, where people are really focusing on the security aspects, or interactive media, or games development. So it's really just about the flavors of what you're most interested in. So thank you all very much for attending.